acknowledge that the land from which we're broadcasting from is the traditional country of the Awabakal and Warramai peoples. The colonial project is ongoing and continues to disenfranchise First Nations people. We recognise that sovereignty has never been ceded and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Always was, always will be Aboriginal lands. Hi everyone and welcome to Editing and Submitting 101 with Voiceworks. It's great, I'm very excited to be here today.
We're super excited.
Yeah.
We thought we'd start off by a little intro. Would you like to go?
Yeah, of course. I'm La. I am usually based on unceded Bunurong lands, and my work's been published in Fence Books and Virtual Goods Dealer. I'm a poetry and digital editor for Voiceworks and present on 3CR Community Radio. I'll bump it over to you.
Hi, I'm Shivani. My pronouns are she, her. I come from Wurundjeri land. I create nonfiction and fiction for Voiceworks, and I also write fiction and nonfiction, not just for Voiceworks. Let's maybe start with how we got involved with Voiceworks.
Yeah, well, I am primarily a digital editor for Voiceworks, and I got involved maybe a year or two ago through the digital editing stream. I edit for Voiceworks Online, which just means all the content that Voiceworks produces digitally. Like this can be anything from video art to video games to online poetry pieces to even PowerPoints. It's just all kinds of digital storytelling.
Incredible. Also, I just realized, if you guys don't know what Voiceworks is a literary and online journal, and we are created by and publish creatives under the age of 25. You can please submit to us. If your work is selected, we will edit you and we will pay you. And if it's not selected, it's still a win-win because we'll give you feedback. So that's a brief about Voiceworks. How I got involved with Voiceworks, I was really lucky to study creative writing on a tertiary level, and our uni always promote Voiceworks for us. They're like, submit your pieces to Voiceworks. Like after your assignments have been graded, input the feedback and submit it to Voiceworks. I didn't do that because I was super intimidated. I submitted a poem once and I was rejected and I was really sad. But then I got feedback and I was like, okay, I know why I got rejected and how to be better. And then we have 2 intakes for our editorial committee every year. And I was nervously applied. And at that point, I'd been reading Voiceworks for an entire year, online. I'd been seeing the bitsy stuff you guys were publishing. And I was seeing all of the beautiful print stuff. And I was like, I loved this, this, and this. Please take me, let me in. And very luckily I was let in, and just being in that community of creative people who are so generous with their time and their talent has been so enriching for me as an artist, and I've learned so much, and I'm really grateful to be part of Voiceworks, and highly recommend that every young creative person gets involved with us in some way,
I feel the same. Yeah, definitely.
Now I thought we would break this session up by talking about submitting and editing. So what do you do before you submit and what do you do after you submit? So let's start talking about submitting, I guess.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, we were going to start off talking about submitting to the print magazine, which Shivani knows more about. And so, I might bump it over to you.
Okay, cool. So we're thinking about what are we looking for when we get submissions, right? And we thought this is actually how we score for, I edit mainly nonfiction, sometimes a little bit fiction. Neither of us edit poetry, but we have had input from a poetry editor. We have. So on our scoring sheets, this is what we have for fiction and nonfiction is originality, cohesion, and expression. So Lau will talk about expression and digital focus, which is something that's specific to the online mag. And I'll talk a little bit about originality and cohesion. So with originality, what we want to know is, why are you the person that is the right one to be telling the story, right? So for nonfiction, anybody could be talking about your topic, right? so we want to know, like, what do you uniquely bring into it? And it's impossible to write something completely original. Like, everybody's thought of everything, right? But what we really mean by originality is specificity. I think like a lot of young writers, they're really inspired, and like this isn't like an innate thing. Like, some people are original and some people aren't. It's very much a learned thing. A lot of young writers have the tendency to write in very, very broad, sweeping ways about like huge themes of life. They're like, I'm talking about love and death and angst, and they talk about it in these like sweeping, vague statements, and like the energy is there, but we want something specific, right? And if you think about things that have moved you, prose or poetry that's really moved you, you'll find that it's always been very specific, because at the end of the day, those big themes that you're trying to access, the universality that you're trying to access, the personal is also the most universal, if that makes sense. Like, the more specific you make it, the more people will be able to empathize with you and engage with your work. So that's what we mean with originality. Like, what are you bringing this? What do you think? And like, what is specific about your experience that you can put into your fiction, to your nonfiction? And when we talk about cohesion, it's a little bit different for fiction and nonfiction. So with fiction, it is, are your characters consistent? And by that, I mean, like, if it's a chaotic, inconsistent character, they can be consistently inconsistent, you know? And we just want like a very well-developed characters who, you know, do things that are in line with their personality and they're believable. For fiction, obviously, if you're writing fantasy, that doesn't mean it has to be realistic. You're writing a dragon who's an accountant, for example. That may not be realistic, but it does have to be believable. We have to empathize with the fact that the dragon's wife cheated on him. I don't know, like, this is a horrible example.
No. I'm writing with this.
But we want something to be believable. We want the characters to be consistent. And with nonfiction, we want you to also engage with the broader cultural conversation. We don't want it to all just be internal. Like, you could be submitting memoir to us, just like a life experience you had, right? But we don't want it to read like a diary entry necessarily. Like, we want you to engage, and this can be engage with pop culture, engage with any form of media, engage with literature, engage with conversations you're having with your family and friends. We just need you to make those connections outwards, and we need you to make sense, essentially. Like, does this make sense? That's cohesion. And like, is this idea that you're exploring carried into relative fruition in your piece? So that's originality and cohesion.
Lovely.
Pass over to you.
Yeah, I'll talk about expression. I think expression builds on originality and cohesion quite a lot. Expression is just about how well the writer is expressing themselves in language. And so things to think about here. First, I always think about, is the piece overly wordy or not? We're definitely very into not obscuring the meaning and writing excessively. Next, and you already covered this, but not diving too deep into cliche expressions. So we do get a lot of cheesy expressions regarding love. And sometimes this is done really well, but we tend to avoid cliches in expression. You could ask yourself, are the phrases really beautiful? Does your audience feel swept up by your language? And a personal piece of advice I'd offer, especially for poetry, is I really love when people experiment with sensory language. So you think about what you can taste and what you can touch. I think that's definitely a way to sweep your audience off their theme. In terms of, this is all what we've been speaking about so far is when we're editing for print submissions, but when editing for Voiceworks Online, we also have another category we edit for called digital focus. And digital focus is pretty much how well does this piece use digital storytelling tools? Or is it looking like something that could otherwise be in the print mag? One key example of this is, does the form of the piece embody the theme? For instance, if you're talking about fire, or you're talking about something explosive, you could animate the text, or you could use fragmented hyperlinks. And hyperlinks are just links from one document that are sending off to another location. Here, it's mostly about just does accessing the digital element of your piece add something to piece, and is it involved in the story rather than just being a kind of flashy add-on. But as well, it's important, I think, to say don't overthink this. Like, as Digital Edcom, we're here to help you along with this sort of thing. And if you reach out to us, especially when you're pitching, we can help you along with learning about digital tools. Yeah. And we thought we'd briefly talk about, we have, despite not being poetry editors, from some input from our poetry editors, we wanted to talk about substance and form, which is just specific to poetry submissions for the poets out there. Yeah.
Do you want to go substance?
Yeah, of course. Okay, in terms of substance, it's just about whether the poem has a clear intention. Does it know what it's saying, and is the writer clear on their intentions, and is this well conveyed?
Yeah. And form essentially goes hand in hand with substance almost, because form is like, does it complement substance? Like, and this is something I struggle with. I don't even write poetry because I'm so scared of form. It's like, I often think when I write poetry, is this just prose with line breaks?
Sure.
And I think that's where this intentionality around form comes in. Like, are you just doing this for fun? Or like, have you thought about what you're saying and how you're actually organizing your words? And they can be organized in such a wonderful like myriad of ways, but they have to be like consistent with the content of what you're saying and help communicate that content. Yeah,
absolutely. We might move on to talking about actually pitching your work to the print or digital mags. Yeah, if you wanted to talk about pitching your work for nonfiction.
So we have a whole digital resource. Just look up Voiceworks nonfiction, and we have like this, and we have it same for digital as well, I think. So I highly recommend that. I mean, we will tell you guys, but also look at that resource online. Look at Voiceworks' website. We have so much explanation that is much more articulate than I am this morning on how to pitch. But essentially, for nonfiction, what we're looking for is please send us an excerpt of your work. So when you're pitching, you don't have to have the entire work. You don't have to have written the entire thing. And we encourage you to pitch because we'll be more likely to take on something that you pitch, that we've helped you with. Like if you write a whole work and you submit it, it's either a yes or a no. If it's a pitch, it is still either a yes or a no. But if it's a yes, it's like, here's some guidance on how to develop it. And then we consider it as along with the completed nonfiction submissions, if that makes sense. So what we want is give us a brief outline, like a comprehensive but brief outline of like, what is your aim with this piece? Why should you be the one telling the story? And along with that, I want to say like, avoid writing about like personal experiences from communities that you're not a member of. We're not very likely to accept those kinds of submissions. So write something that you are the right person to write. Explain to us why you're writing about it, what your intention with the piece is, a rough word count of the piece, where it's going to go. Try to be as comprehensive in the planning of it as you can. Like, obviously, you don't have to have the whole piece finished. That's why it's a pitch. And give us like an excerpt of your writing. Sometimes people submit and they don't give us an excerpt, so we have an idea of what they're planning to do, but we have no idea of their voice or tone, which is really difficult to take on a pitch like that. So we want a flavor, we want a taste of your writing, and we want to know your plan with nonfiction pitching. I think that's it. Yeah, that's about it. Also check out the online resource, voiceworksmag.com. I think that's the one.
No, you said that really eloquently. Like, all I have to add in terms of pitching work to Voiceworks Online is just reiterating what I said before about digital tools. Make sure the digital tools you're using or the decisions you make really complement the themes of the piece if you're submitting to Voiceworks Online. I thought I'd talk about a few digital tools that you could use when you're submitting. The ones that I really like and that are quite common with the submissions to Voiceworks Online. One is called Twine, and this is a free tool for animating poetry that can be downloaded onto your laptops. The best thing about Twine is that it's interactive. It uses hyperlinks, which what I said before, the links from one document to another location to tell stories that can go off in all sorts of directions, which is really exciting. Also, we get a lot of Bitsy submissions, and Bitsy is like bit.sy. It's another free tool that can be used to create video games. It has this kind of early retro aesthetic. And there's lots of tutorials for both of these programs online on YouTube, and also as Edcom, we're here to help you out if you want some training how to use any of these programs. Yeah, let's move on. I think after talking about submitting, we'll move to having a chat about editing.
Yeah, and another thing I wanted to say about submitting though is that we were planning to talk about is please read our magazine before you submit.
Yeah, that's a key one.
Editors can really tell, like if you've written a uni essay, you heard about Voiceworks and you submitted it straight through without reading our magazine, it is very obvious to us. So please read, like at least one issue, read it. Or if not the whole issue, read like the genre that the section that you're submitting to. If you're submitting nonfiction, read nonfiction that we published before, so you get a taste of what we're likely to publish. So that's an advantage for you, and it's also like lets us know that you're actually interested and serious. But at the same time, like don't be scared and be open to experimentation and a sense of play, because sometimes if we haven't published something yet, it's just because we haven't received a submission like that, and we're really open to something that's like totally new. But please also read our magazine.
Yeah, that's
before you submit.
Say.
Please read anything that you submit to. You should read it before you submit. Goes without saying. Now, my soul is at peace. We can move on to editing now.
Yeah, brilliant.
Did you want to talk about the editorial process of online?
Sure.
It's very mysterious to me as well. So
I think it often sounds very mysterious, and I think people can be quite intimidated to submit to Voiceworks Online, but it's very similar to the print process. The only difference is the process wherein Voiceworks Online editors are helping you realize some sort of digital tool that accompanies the piece. And so we get a full spectrum of folks that are completely new to digital storytelling or very advanced down the track. And I don't think being on either side of that spectrum disadvantages you in terms of your submission. For instance, if you come to us saying, like with a poem, and you say, I want to animate this poem in this specific way according to the story, if your piece is selected, we'll be very available to Zoom and train you up in the digital program you'd use to get there. But other than that, it's very similar to the editorial process with print.
So with print, I'm trying to cover all these sections. So obviously we have nonfiction pitches. That's the only genre in print that we have pitches for. Everything else is just submissions. You also can submit completed nonfiction that's not pitches. So I'll just briefly touch on pitches, which I did touch on before as well. But with pitching, it's a bit different because you pitch, and then the editorial process is, if we like your pitch, we will get back to you and say, here's some guidance on how to complete your full piece if you haven't already completed it. And please try to make these changes before you submit the full piece to us. And then once you submit the full piece to us, we'll consider it along with the completed nonfiction. So that's just some guidance before you. It doesn't guarantee that we will take your piece for the magazine, if that makes sense. And then once it is a complete submission, it's just like fiction, poetry, and completed nonfic subs. All of them are on the same level. So with the completed stuff, we read it, we discuss it, all of us discuss it, all of us score it. Everything is read like multiple times. There's multiple eyes on every piece. We all try to read it as kind of like objectively as we can and discuss every piece comprehensively. And then we agree on the pieces that we're going to take and who's going to edit what. And then once we take it, we will send you a first email that is usually very long, being like, this is why we really love your piece. We love it so much. And we also say, these are ways that maybe you could think about refining these points in your piece and refining these points in your piece. And we send you a massive Word doc with like track changes on and like little comments. And it's like a back and forth process, right? Like we go back and forth. And like, one thing to remember is like, as creatives, as people submitting, the piece is very much your piece. We're just your first readers. We're the first people. We're like, as an editor, I feel like there's always like three roles that you're playing. You're playing the role of like a critic or a gatekeeper to some extent, because we're deciding like what goes into our magazine. We're setting like a standard, and we do that with as much like empathy and consideration as we can. And the second role is as first reader, because we get something and we're often the first people externally to read it, unless you've like workshopped it in uni. Obviously it's different, but we're often like the first set of like completely external eyes to read it. And think of like a hedge maze, right? The writer is inside that hedge maze, but we're seeing the aerial view of that hedge maze. Yeah, that kind of. I'm not going to think about my analogies too much, but you know, we can see where it doesn't lead anywhere, and where it's very clear and you can get to the other side. So the author is always like, they know what their intention is, and they're like, everything is so clear to me. It's like, yeah, because you thought of it, and like everything is very clear to you, but we're reading it and we're seeing, is it clear to the reader? So it's a very collaborative process, editing, because we're saying like, we're asking you like, what is your intention? So often in that very long first email will be like, what is your intention? What are you trying to achieve with this piece? What are the key themes that you really, really want to stand out in your piece? And then we work with you so that we can bring that forward. And we're really championing your work. And every edit that we make is in your best interest. But you also never have to accept an edit that you don't want to accept, because yeah, like I said, it is ultimately your piece. You have final say over it. We're just helping you bring your intention to the forefront of the piece for the reader.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if you disagree with a sudden edit, you just have to justify why you disagree. Yeah. And oftentimes we'll accept that and move on.
Yeah. And like, even if we don't like that you won't accept our edit, sometimes like we will accept it, you know, like there's no instance where we're gonna be like, no, you have to cut this even if you don't want to. Like, editors aren't that scary. We're like little nervous people that are like you know, like there's this idea that we're going in with a red pen being like, exactly. No, yes, no. That's not what we're doing at all. And there's stages to editing for print, and I'm sure for online as well. Like, there's the structural edit, which is usually what we'll start off with. I was in an editing workshop yesterday, and artist Grace was talking about how structural editing is sort of like you're renovating a house, and you start with like the foundation and the like pillars and the roof, right? That's a really big picture important stuff, and there's no point picking out the paint colors before you do that. The paint colors bit is like proofreading and copy editing, which is that more of that red pen thing. And all of us in the print magazine copy edit and proofread every single piece. So like even the nonfiction editors will proofread poetry, because we want everyone's eyes on it. And sometimes like we'll still get like a few typos through, but you know, we're also under 25, we're also babies. But we try our best. So we start with the structural edit, give you, so do you want to talk about like structural edits for online, and like what are the sorts of things that what's the sort of feedback that you would give on that level?
Good question. I think in terms of structural editing, it's really just that digital focus edit in terms of like how much like does the form reflect the story. That's kind of our structural edit. And I think that's all I have to say on that one.
Are you editing the actual narrative as well for online, like structurally?
Yeah, to a degree, but we don't always get, when you're writing for online, I'm sure this applies for print as well, it's not always like the whole hero's journey narrative. Like a lot of the time we get a lot of nonsense content, non-linear content, interactive content, and that also works really well as well.
Content. I am nonsense content. So it's very similar for print. I think it's what I talked about before with cohesion and consistency. In the structural edit, we're going, is this consistent? Does this make sense that this would happen? Have you done that wider cultural engagement with literature or media or anything outside? Have you shown us like anything that's outside of the character's head, essentially, so that we know it feels believable, it feels like it makes sense, and it feels interesting? So that's what it is at the structural stage. And then we move on to the copy editing stage. Do you want to talk a bit about copy editing?
Yeah, copy editing, it'll primarily be language. For instance, like if you've got an interactive poem, sometimes people have words that change and chop around or disappear or things like that. And we are editing at that point digitally for cohesion as well, I think, at the copy editing stage. Yeah, also typos, but yeah, we get most of these, I think.
We get most of them, especially because I think once we've copy edited, it goes through, and we go through like 9 back and forth rounds where we're like structural edit, copy edit, and it's not very linear. Like sometimes it's structurally editing, copy editing. It's all like mixed together, you know? It's not as distinct as it sounds in theory. Once we've finished most of the copy edits that we can find, and by that time we've read your piece so many times that we will also like miss the little copy edits, you know. And then it goes to our editor, and then we have like a proof of the magazine for print, and everyone reads every piece. So there's like 3 weeks. So for reflection, I think we've moved from 4 issues to 3 issues a year, and there's going to be like 4 months between like when you submit and when your piece will be in print. What's the timeline like for online?
Oh, it's pretty similar, except we often have at the start of, maybe it's like a 3-month turnaround, and at the start of this turnaround, we often run digital writing jams, which I really advise coming and being a part of and checking out because they're lots of fun. Digital writing jams are just a couple of days of all different sorts of workshops and activities, often hosted on Discord, to a different theme, and often that theme will coincide with our upcoming digital issue. And so it's a great opportunity to get started on a digital piece and get some prompts, and also be in like active collaboration with the editors at that point. Yeah, but I think it's about a 3 or 4 month turnaround as well with online. Yeah.
And you guys have 2 issues?
Yeah. Well, it's I think about 2.5 a year. Kind of.
2.5.
It depends on how long it takes to edit.
2.5 issues.
Yeah.
Online is very exciting and like unpredictable. Wow.
Definitely, this is true.
Yeah, print is like that didn't make sense. But yeah, that's what it is. So what else? What else are we doing at the copy editing stage? We're also like we're gonna talk about adverbs.
Let's talk about
try to have really active language. That's also something that we will focus on. Like we want you to describe something in concrete nouns. Try to avoid too many adverbs and being too kind of didactic and expository in your writing. Like we want you, like we don't want, like even for nonfiction, we're not publishing a news report. We're not publishing like a purely academic essay. We don't want you to write like what a camera lens sees exactly. But I think that sensory engagement is really, really important, like La said. And so really engage and show and make us feel what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Don't explain it. So that whole, like, you know, I'm sure everyone knows showing, not telling, yada, 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 classic. Also, if you guys want to ask questions, please send them through, because at the end, once we've stopped being like, well, editing, we will answer.
I think, and as a final note on what we were talking about, I think I will just reiterate about writing accessibly. I think it's like a really important thing as a young writer to be learning how to write accessibly. This is just building off what you said, but we don't necessarily want academic essays. You want to be communicating to your peers and all your peers, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And like, don't submit your high school or uni essays to us. You can submit creative pieces that you wrote in high school or uni. That's different. But if you submit like an analysis of a Neil Gaiman piece, that's not. I mean, like it can be something that you independently did and creatively engaged with. But if you distinctly did it for like a uni, unit, it comes across.
Yeah, definitely. But there's so many opportunities to like play with existing pieces of writing.
Absolutely.
We get pieces that are full of redaction. We get pieces that are completely messy and made into like mind maps or videos or things like that. So there's a lot of opportunity to change what you've already got.
transmute it.
Exactly.
Just don't submit it as it is, like after that uni class when you heard about Voiceworks for the first time. Send it in. Don't do that. Like, sit with it. Thinking about sitting with it, that's also like a really important point for the submitting part, is like, and I've done this before, I'm guilty of it, and every time I've done this, my writing hasn't been selected, so that's reason why you shouldn't do it. Don't submit something as soon as you write it. Mm-hmm. Do not do that. Write something, okay, and do something else for 3 days. Don't look at it for the next, like, at least 24 hours. I would recommend 3 days or a week. Put it away, live your life, do something different, read other things, write other things, go on a walk, and come back with a totally fresh pair of eyes. So you have more insight into, like, what am I saying? Are my intentions being communicated clearly? Do I know what I was saying? What do I want to say? And, like, are there those cliches? Am I being vague and sweeping too widely? Where can I sharpen it up? Just give it a review and a little mini edit before you submit, and you'll have, like, I don't know the statistics, 60% more chance. That was a completely made up Shivani statistic, but you have a much higher chance because you've actually sat on it and thought about it, and your brain has done a lot of background work on it. Yeah. Whereas as soon as you write, you're so full of this sort of exhilaration at finishing a piece that you're like, yes, here, have it, which is like, sit with it, simmer, let it simmer, let it cook in the oven of your brain, and then submit.
Yeah, I definitely agree with this. This is good advice. I also wanted to say, and you did mention this before, but at Voiceworks, we are regularly accepting applications to join the editorial team. Mm. And so, as well as publishing under 25s, we're completely run by under 25s too. And so if you're seeking editorial experience, definitely consider applying. Yeah, we love new Edcommers.
We love baby Edcommers.
Yeah, we really do.
And we will really, like, guide you through the editing process. Like, your first issue will be like, you'll be buddied up with editors. Is it the same with online?
Yeah, the same.
You'll have an ed buddy. I have a little ed buddy. They're not little. They're just my ed buddy. I have an ed buddy, and, like, I look at their edits and I say, this is great, and maybe say this, like, in a slightly different way. Mm-hmm. So, like, you're really guided through it, and you'll be comfortable and a pro in no time. So, highly recommend joining Edcom for under 25. If you're over 25, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. What else can we say about editing? Editing tips. The other thing I wanted to say is, like, if you're editing, like, if your piece has been selected and you're a writer that we're editing, try to please be punctual and, like, respond to our changes. Like, we're all, like, working really hard towards your piece, and we really want to see you engage with us. And, like, you don't have to accept all the changes. Just be punctual and get it in by the deadline. We do have a publishing deadline, so that's really important. So that's one thing.
Yeah, even if this is just notifying us of, like, if you're busy at that week, for notifying us of receipt of the email, things like that. Like, it's just, like, training up in the skills of being edited for the first or second or third time. It's quite important to be in communication with your editor. Yeah, definitely.
Also, try not to add too many things in the last minute. That's very difficult. I mean, like, sure, if you have like a gem thought that you're like, this is so profoundly paradigm shifting for my piece, I need to add it in there, do it and tell us about it. But, like, don't be like randomly adding things, new ideas that you got, because that just keeps on more edits, and then our timeline just shifts, and we got to get it in and polished by publication, so try to avoid that.
Yeah, definitely. And we haven't mentioned it because this isn't exactly our expertise, but we also have comics and art submissions. Which is so key, and we absolutely love. I might actually hold up.
About that.
I did too. But this is our most recent copy from Voiceworks. It's called Gleam. We've got beautiful art.
Look at this.
All through.
Very cool.
I want to get the name of the artist. So Cecile Richard did this cover art.
Yeah, Cecile Richard is also our designer. They're also an incredible Bitsy game and like artist, Bitsy game designer and digital narrative artist, and big fan of their work. Cecile, if you're watching this. I'm also going to show you some comic that we published.
Yeah,
to prove that we do indeed publish comics. We do. There's like 3 every issue at least. Here's a little comic. Our youngest comic artist, by the way, Yuna, she's like 11. So when we say under 25, you could be a baby. You could be a prodigy baby submitting to Voiceworks if you'd like. So yeah, very beautiful. And one thing for artists is that we always publish in duotone. So our cover is always in like multicolor, right? But inside, we essentially choose 2 colors. This is because of printing costs and such that we publish in. For this, it was this, what is this color? Aqua teal color, and this light blue, and yeah. So we choose, it's in duotone. So when you do submit art to us, think about, could it be translated to this duotone palette? Does it make sense in 2 colors? Yeah.
Yeah,
because sometimes there's pieces that we really want to publish and they're really beautiful, but if we turn them into duotone, they just don't work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Was there anything else we wanted to say about editing? Or
I think I'm happy to move on to questions, but if you want to say anything else about editing or submitting. Yeah,
I think that's it.
Beautiful. Well, we actually had a question roll through in the chat, which says, how have you both dealt with the rejection of your work when submitting personally, and any advice on dealing with this maybe for the first time? This is a good question. But both of us sit back immediately.
We're like,
yeah, it's a really good question. Let me just think. I think just learning persistence and not just practicing, not putting all of yourself into your work and taking it as a personal rejection. I think and this is even me giving advice unto myself. It's just, despite whatever hit to your confidence that you might feel, if you have rejection, it's like paying attention, number one, to the feedback that we offer you. Always like opting in for feedback is what I do. If editors offered feedback, like at Voiceworks, taking it and just trying again and again. I think I don't know, how would you?
Okay, so I think being an editor has really helped me with handling rejection, knowing what happens behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Before I was an editor, I was more likely to take rejection very personally. Like I would be rejected and I would be like, I guess I suck at writing. No more writing for me.
Yeah.
That's not what it is. Like you need to be really tenacious and like keep going, because there's such a huge list of reasons why your writing could have been rejected. And like while we give feedback, like not a lot of submissions do give feedback, so oftentimes the thing that sucks about it is that you're just kind of left in the dark. But some of the reasons could be, maybe there was a theme and your piece wasn't on brand with the theme. Maybe it just isn't in line with the tone of the publication. Maybe, and like a lot of things, sometimes we will reject a nonfiction piece and it gets published somewhere else. So it's like a perfect sort of example on, just because one publication rejected you doesn't mean there's anything inherently wrong with the piece.
Yeah.
Maybe it just wasn't for them. Like this is a very sort of impersonal process as it goes on in the background for us editors. And I know it's really, really hard to take it in an impersonal way. And it's fine to be hurt by rejection. Like we're all hurt by it. Like, you know, like when I get my hopes up really high and you submit and you're like, I bet I'm like 70% sure they'll take it. And they're like, no. You're like, you have a little like sad, like a little, okay, fine. But then don't take it as saying something definitive about the quality of your piece or your ability as a writer. That's the important thing. Like let yourself be a little bit bummed out, but try again and revise it if you'd like. Like I said, like walk away from it for a while, revise it if you'd like, try submitting it to other places that might take it. So that's also a thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Keep submitting. Be tenacious. Keep going. Be a minute. Okay, I'm not gonna sing Mulan songs. There's what is your experience with wanting to maybe withdraw a piece from being published, either as a writer yourself, on the editor side of things, or on the editor side of things? Is there a proper process or etiquette for this?
I was just trying to think if there's any line. You can withdraw a piece at any point up to publication, and I don't think there's no particular process. It's just
there's an etiquette. Like, you have to tell us you're withdrawing if you want to withdraw. Like, clearly. Communicate it to the editor, communicate it to the editor-in-chief of the magazine. Tell them. If you've submitted and it hasn't been selected yet, just send an email to the email that you find, like the info email or the editor email, saying, hey, I submitted this, but usually that happens when cross-submitting, right? Like, you've submitted to multiple things. One thing has already taken your piece, so you have to withdraw, pull out, or like, for whatever reason, you're uncomfortable. It doesn't matter. Just send through an email being like, hey, just letting you guys know I'm pulling my piece out of the drawer. And everyone will be fine with it. Like, it's exactly. Totally chill.
Yeah, and it happens a bit. Yeah, it's common. So, yeah.
It's totally fine.
Another question. What are you both working on now, either as editors or as writers?
Get that self-promo! What are you working on?
It's a damn good question. Let me just think. I've been doing like workshops and a little bit of research on a project I call Data Flows Like Water. So it's about data in the ocean, which is very similar to our kind of data plants theme that we've got going on currently with Voiceworks Online.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so much fun talking about kind of undersea creatures, but also talking about all sorts of data technologies to do with water. It's really,
I love that.
It's really,
that's so exciting.
It's definitely just a personal interest project, but I love it.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it when it comes out.
What about you?
Incredible. Okay, so I have been just trying to make time in my life to do creative work. But I really want to get back into writing short fiction with magical realism, and I'm really passionate about Indian mythology. So I want to incorporate more of that into my magical realism short fiction. Yesterday I was on a mythology panel and I kept talking about apsaras, which are these like Indian celestial nymphs, and how they're like this group of like immortal, beautiful ladies who aren't allowed to marry men. And I was like, what if some of them fell in love? Like, so like, I really want to write an Apsara romance.
I'm so excited to see this. Yeah,
awesome. So that's what I'm working on.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. Just wanted to ask how much previous publishing/editing experience you need to apply for EdCom.
I would argue absolutely zero, because that's what I had when I entered Voiceworks. Whether for online or print, you can come in as a complete newbie without any editing experience. Obviously it helps, but I don't know, what was your experience?
Well, like I said, I've been lucky enough to do a tertiary degree in writing, but I don't think that was like necessary at all. Like we have Edcommers, Sanaway, who used to be an Edcommer, she was studying medicine. We have Edcommers who are doing science, math degrees, who aren't in uni. Like your education doesn't have anything to do with it. Your experience doesn't really have anything to do with it. I had edited like a uni anthology for like a unit or something. Very, very minimal experience. And you don't even have to have that. You just have to be really excited and passionate about our magazine, about our kind of like ethos, like our ideas behind the magazine of supporting and championing young creatives. And that's about it. Like, you just have to be really passionate about it and into it. And we just want to understand why you want to be in an editorial role too. Like, why are you excited to do that? And what do you think you'll bring as an editor? You don't need to have any experience.
No, I definitely agree. Was there anything else you wanted to add, or otherwise? No? Otherwise, thank you for tuning in, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, we should talk about, before we go, just our upcoming National Young Writers Festival events.
Yes. I have a live one in Newcastle today, which is a fantasy panel. That's also what's coming up for me in like about an hour. It is happening, I think, 12 to 1. What about you?
So I also have a live event at Newcastle Library for whoever's coming down in 15 minutes. So run if you're coming here now. But yeah, it's called Press A for Starters. I'll be speaking more about digital writing, which we've touched on a bit now. Yeah. But thank you for tuning in.
Thank you so much for your time. Submit to Voiceworks and read Voiceworks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bye.